3 million years ago, East Africa. Dawn has not yet arrived, but the darkness has already changed. From dense, impenetrable, alive, it has turned gray, simply gray. And this distinction, which has no name and never will have one, already means something. It is already telling the body something. The creature wakes, not at once, not abruptly. It does not decide to wake the way we do when we reach for a phone or hear an alarm. It wakes because something outside has changed. Temperature, smell, the quality of sound. Something in the world shifted by a fraction of a degree, and the body detected it through sleep before it had time to formulate anything even remotely like a thought. This is not a metaphor. This is physiology. The brain of this creature weighs about 400 grams, about the same as the brain of a modern chimpanzee, almost 3 times smaller than ours. But inside those 400 grams, there is already something that a cat does not have, a bird does not have, a lizard frozen on a stone 20 meters away since last evening does not have. Inside this brain is a system that did not stop working all night. It sorted sounds, separated the rustle of leaves from the faint scraping of something alive, separated wind from breathing, separated safe from dangerous, without thinking about it, without becoming aware of it, simply doing it, automatically, continuously, all night, while the body lay motionless on a branch in the fork of a tree 4 meters above the ground. And now something has changed. And the body wakes. The first thing there is smell. Not in the sense in which we say, I smelled something, as if smell were optional, a pleasant bonus added to the perception of the world. No. For this creature, smell is a map. It is primary information, ahead of sight, ahead of sound. The olfactory bulb in its brain occupies a relatively larger share than in ours. In us, it shrank, giving way to the visual cortex and the frontal lobes. We traded sharp smell for the ability to plan and speak. But 3 million years ago, that trade had not yet happened. Smell says wet soil, dew, grass that exhales differently at night than during the day. Something large passed nearby, perhaps an hour ago, perhaps 2. An antelope. Direction. There, toward the acacia grove. No, not a predator. A predator would smell different. A predator would smell in a way that would have changed the heartbeat before the creature managed to formulate, this is a predator. But this is not a predator. This is something herbivorous, large, already gone. The second thing there is cold. At night on the African savannah 3 million years ago, the temperature falls. Not to freezing, but enough for a body that spent the night in a fork of a tree without fire, without clothing, without a blanket to feel the difference. The hair on this creature is already not as thick as on its ancestors. Evolution has already begun moving toward reduced body hair because on the daytime savannah, when running is necessary, thick fur means overheating. But at night, that comes at a price. The creature tucked its legs in even while asleep, curled up, pressed itself tighter against the branch. This is not a decision. It is a reflex, as ancient as the creature itself. Mice do the same. Bats do the same. We do the same when we are cold at night and curl into a ball under a blanket without thinking about it, simply doing it. The creature opens its eyes. Its vision is good, binocular, color, with good depth perception. This is already primate vision, tuned for life in the three-dimensional space of branches, for judging distances, for distinguishing ripe fruit among green leaves. The eyes face forward, not to the sides, like a predator's rather than a rabbit's. That matters. It means precision, not perimeter. It is not light yet. The horizon is only beginning to brighten, a thin orange line in the east. Everything else is gray. The trees below are dark silhouettes. The grass is indistinguishable. The sky is gray with the first traces of blue. And in that grayness, movement, below, to the left, about 30 meters away, something is moving. The system in those 400 grams of brain that spent the whole night sorting sounds now switches into a different mode. Not just something is moving, but how large, how fast, in which direction, coming closer or moving away. Is there a scent? There is almost no scent. The wind is wrong, but the movement is not fast. Not the way a cat or a leopard moves before a leap. More like something that is searching, a herbivore, or another member of the group that has already climbed down and is doing something. There is alarm. There is always alarm at dawn, when visibility is still poor. But the alarm does not turn into panic. The brain keeps it at the level of heightened attention, not at the level of the command run. This distinction between alarm and panic, between readiness and flight, is evolution too. Another system shaped over millions of years, a creature that ran at every rustle, spent too much energy, and did not eat enough. A creature that did not react at all died. The ones who survived were those with balance, and that calibrated alarm is working right now in a brain on a tree branch in a gray African morning. The creature begins to move, slowly. First it simply changes posture, unclenches its legs, shifts its weight. This is not the way we get out of bed. There is no mattress, no floor, no ritual of 5 more minutes. There is a branch. There are 4 meters to the ground. There is a body that must move from rest into readiness carefully, without extra noise, without falling. The hands hold the branch. These are Australopithecine hands, no longer quite like a chimpanzee's, not yet quite like ours. The thumb is already somewhat set apart. The grip is already somewhat different. Not the precise pinch grip that, in 2 million years, will allow the handling of a needle and thread, but already moving in that direction. The hands can hold, can pull, can grab a stone and strike with it. Not with the precision a Homo habilis will have a million years later, but already with more than is needed merely to climb trees. The legs are another story. The legs of an Australopithecine are a compromise that fully satisfies no one. They are already upright walking. The femur, the shape of the pelvis, the angle of the knee joint all already point to a creature that walks vertically. But they are also still climbing legs. The toes are longer than ours. The ankle is more flexible. The calf muscles work differently. This creature walks, but it also climbs trees more easily than we do, and comes down from trees differently than we do. It lives at the border between ground and canopy. Every morning begins with this transition, from above to below, from the safety of branches to the openness of the savannah. The creature begins to descend. Ground. There it is under its feet. Hard, damp, cold. The grass is wet with dew. The feet touch it, and this is a different sensation, not like a branch. More complex, uneven. The ground does not hold the body the way a branch does. On the ground, balance is constant work, constant micro-corrections, constant effort from the muscles of the lower leg and the foot that are not needed in the tree. Bipedalism is not what we imagine it to be. We think of it as something obvious. You simply stood up and walked. But in reality, bipedal walking is a constant fall forward that the next step manages to catch. It is balance that is never static. It is the cerebellum making corrections to body position every fraction of a second. It is a huge portion of the nervous system occupied exclusively with not falling, while also moving forward. In the Australopithecine, this mechanism already exists, but it is not yet as polished as in us. The gait is slightly different. Not waddling, but with a different rhythm, a different distribution of weight. The biomechanics are different. Later, when Australopithecine footprints are found in hardened volcanic deposits at Laetoli, researchers will study those impressions again and again and see something astonishing in them. Not human footprints, but very close. Footprints of a creature that walked across hot ash 3,600,000 years ago, walked upright, and apparently walked beside another creature like itself. 2 creatures, side by side, going somewhere. That image is one of the most powerful in paleoanthropology, but now it is simply morning, simply ground underfoot, simply wet grass. The group. Nearby there are others, several. They too are waking, climbing down from trees, standing below now or still fussing above. There are not many of them. An Australopithecine group was most likely small, a few dozen individuals at most, probably fewer. Not a herd. Not solitary beings. Something in between, a social unit that, 3 million years later, anthropologists will call a band or a roaming group and argue about its exact size, structure, and hierarchy. But now it is simply a few bodies nearby, a few familiar smells, a few familiar sounds. That already matters, not because the creature thinks about it, but because the nervous system registers it. Its owner near. Alarm drops by one more level. It does not disappear, but it drops. This too is evolution. Primate sociality is not a whim and not sentimentality. It is a survival strategy. Alone on the savannah is nearly impossible. Predators isolate loners. A loner cannot monitor every direction at once. A loner who is injured receives no help. A loner is almost a death sentence. The group is a distributed nervous system. Each one watches a different direction. Each one hears something different. Each one smells something different. If danger appears, someone in the group will notice first. The alarm signal will spread instantly. Everyone will simultaneously know what one individual noticed. This is not intelligence. It is not planning. It is the group as an organ of perception. And it works. It had worked for millions of years before the Australopithecine, and it will work for millions of years after it. It works in fish in a school, in birds in a flock, in gazelles in a herd. The principle is the same. Distributed attention raises the odds of survival for each individual. Hunger, there it is. The first truly strong sensation of this morning. Not acute hunger, not yet the kind that comes after 2 days without food when the body begins to consume itself, but hunger as background, as a constant noise that existed yesterday and the day before and never fully disappears. Hunger as the basic state. This is important to understand. We live in a world where hunger is the exception, an anomaly, something that happens if you miss lunch or go on a diet. Our brain perceives hunger as a problem that must be solved urgently. Go to the kitchen, open the refrigerator, order delivery. 3 million years ago, hunger was the norm. It was not a problem to be solved. It was the condition of life within which one had to function, to gather, to move, to make decisions, to interact with the group, to avoid dangers, and all of that in a state of constant mild or moderate hunger, because calories were always fewer than needed, and one could never know in advance when the next food would come. The brain of this creature was shaped by that condition. A brain that completely shut down in a state of hunger was evolutionarily doomed. A brain that worked worse when hungry, thought slower, judged risks more poorly, was also doomed. The survivors were those whose brains could maintain basic functionality even when the stomach was empty, and that brain is our direct ancestor. That is exactly why we, humans of the 21st century, can work while hungry, can make decisions, read, write, speak, negotiate with an empty stomach. This is not willpower. This is inheritance. It is what the savannah honed over millions of years. A brain that does not surrender to hunger. Movement begins. The group begins to move. Not because anyone gave a command. Not because there was a plan. First we go there, then there. Movement simply begins. One creature shifted, another followed, a third moved after that one. This is not herd instinct in the simple sense. It is something more complex, social synchronization without words, without command, through movement, through looks, through the way one body reacts to another. The direction is toward where the fig trees were yesterday. Memory for food is one of the most reliable kinds of memory in primates. Where the fruit was last time, where the water was, where there was shelter. This kind of memory formed earlier than almost anything else. Earlier than memory for faces, earlier than memory for sounds, earlier than memory for events. Because memory for food is directly linked to survival, and a creature without it died. The Australopithecine already has this memory. It works. It leads the group in the morning toward where there was something edible yesterday. Walking. This is a separate experience. Walking on the savannah at dawn. The grass is tall, in places higher than the knee, wet with dew. Every step is the touch of wet stems against bare legs. Cool, almost cold. The ground underfoot is uneven. Here a stone. There a hollow. There a root. They're a dry branch cracking under the body's weight. Walking requires attention. Not the attention we spend walking on asphalt, nearly none, automatic. No. Walking here requires real, living attention to what is underfoot, what is to the right, what is to the left. The pace is unhurried. Not slow, but not fast. This is not a forced march. It is movement by creatures that are simultaneously heading toward a goal and scanning the space around them. Several heads turn from time to time. Several noses lift to test the air. The sky grows lighter. The orange strip on the horizon widens. The first rays have not yet struck the surface of the ground. They only light the low clouds from below, painting them pink and gold. The acacias on the horizon turn into silhouettes against that light. Flat, unmistakably shaped. One of those landscapes that became an archetype. The birds begin. First one, somewhere far away in a crown. One high, isolated sound. Then another. Then several at once, calling back and forth. This is the dawn chorus, a phenomenon found at all latitudes, but in the African savanna, it sounds especially dense and layered. Birds react to light before it becomes bright enough for the human eye. Their photoreceptors are different, more sensitive. For the creature walking now through wet grass, birds are information too. If birds are calling calmly, evenly, back and forth, then within several hundred meters there is nothing that has frightened them. If the birds fall silent suddenly, that is a signal, a warning, an alarm system that does not have to be learned. It only has to be heard. Water. On the way to the fig trees, there is a small body of water. Not a river, more a shallow pond, left over from seasonal rains. The water is murky, warm, with animal tracks on the bank. The tracks are fresh from the night. Antelopes came to drink, and something else did too, larger tracks, with claws pressed deeper into the ground. That something also came here. At night. The creature stops at the water. It drinks. This is not the way we drink. Not a glass of water, coffee, a glass of juice. This is lying down on the belly or standing on all fours above the surface and drinking straight from it, or scooping with a hand if the hand is skillful enough. The Australopithecine most likely could do both. The water is cold. Real, living coldness of natural water that has not been warmed in pipes and not filtered. Its smell is algae, earth, life. Its taste is not neutral the way filtered tap water is. It is alive. And that is all there is. That is the whole breakfast so far. The fig tree, there it is, large, with a wide-spreading crown. On its branches are fruits, not all are ripe. That is visible at once, by color, by the way they hang. But some are. That is good. That is very good. The creature that woke 3 hours ago in a tree in a cold dawn, under a murky gray sky and the smell of wet earth, is now standing before food. Real food. Something that will go into the body and give it what it needs for the rest of the day. The joy at the sight of ripe fruit is not a metaphor. It is neurochemistry. Dopamine. The same neurotransmitter that in us, people of the 21st century, is released when we open notifications on a phone, when we get likes, when we see that someone has written to us. The same one. Because dopamine is the system of anticipated reward. The system that says there it is, there is what you need, go there. 3 million years ago that system worked for ripe fruit. Now it works for notifications. The system is the same. The creature begins to eat. The fruits are figs, essentially. Soft, sweet, full of seeds. Rich in sugar, quick energy that will enter the blood fast, raise glucose levels, give the brain and muscles what they need for the next hours. But sugar is not the only thing needed. This is one of the key problems of the Australopithecine diet. It is rich in fiber, rich in carbohydrates from fruits and tubers, but poor in protein and fat. Meat is rare. Not because the Australopithecine never ate meat on principle. It did, and marks on bones confirm it. But hunting without good weapons is not a systematic strategy. It is chance. It is carrion taken away from another predator in time. It is a small animal caught without much of a plan. The brain that over the next 2 million years will nearly triple in size will require different fuel. More fat, more protein, more calories. And this dietary shift, the move toward more meat, will become one of the engines of brain evolution. A brain that begins to eat better will begin to grow. A brain that begins to grow will begin to obtain food more effectively. A feedback loop that will spin up in the ages to come. But for now, figs. For now, what there is. For now, that is good. Other creatures are nearby. While eating continues, the group has settled around the tree. Some are eating too. Some sit on a branch and watch. Some are grooming, combing through another's hair, looking for parasites. This is not only hygiene. Grooming in primates is social glue. It is a way of maintaining bonds, expressing belonging, reducing anxiety. It is precisely during grooming that oxytocin is released, the bonding hormone that millions of years later will still work in us when we hug those close to us, when we hold hands, when we simply sit next to someone familiar and safe. There is no speech, there is no language, no words, no grammar, no sentences. But there is communication. It exists in sounds, not speech, but sounds. Short cries, growls, soft calling sounds. A sharp warning cry that still means careful without any dictionary. It exists in postures, in who sits how, who looks at whom, who turned away, who moved closer. It exists in touch, in who touches whom, how, when. This is already a rich system, already complex, already capable of conveying more than danger or food, already capable of something like "I trust you," or "I feel bad now," or "look there." Not with words, but already. The sun, there it is. It has risen above the horizon, and at the moment when the first direct rays strike the surface of the ground, the grass, the skin, the temperature changes instantly. Not by many degrees, but noticeably. The light becomes different. The world becomes different. African morning sunlight is particular. It is not soft as in northern latitudes. It is already real at once, already hot at once. Within an hour it will hit with such force that the skin will begin to heat faster than it can cool itself through sweat. And here lies one of the most important biological features of this creature: sweating. The Australopithecine sweats, almost the way we do. This is striking because most savanna animals do not sweat like that. Horses do. But most other mammals cool themselves differently. Through heavy breathing, through retreating to shade, through restricting activity during the hottest hours. Humans and their ancestors chose another path. Millions of sweat glands on the skin. Loss of body hair that interferes with the evaporation of sweat. The ability to move across the open savanna during the hottest part of the day, when all predators lie in the shade and wait for cooler air. This is not a minor detail. It is a competitive advantage that changed everything. Because on the savanna there is one resource valuable enough: the meat of large animals killed by predators. And that resource is often guarded by predators at blazing noon. But the one who can walk under the burning sun, who can survive heat that forces down lions and hyenas and everything else, that one arrives at the carcass when the predators have gone into the shade. That one gets food. Sweating is not just thermoregulation. Sweating is a strategy of access to resources. The day unfolds. Morning is over. Not in the sense that something changed abruptly or that something important happened. Simply the light is different now. The temperature is different now. There was food. There was water. The group is nearby. The body is moving. That is enough. From our perspective, this does not sound like much. It sounds like nothing, no comfort, no safety, no plans, no meaning, no purpose beyond the next food and the next shelter. But that enough, that basic functioning, this ability to exist and continue in conditions that would seem unbearable to us, that is exactly what became the starting point. Exactly from this, everything else grew. Every next step of evolution, the enlargement of the brain, the appearance of tools, the birth of language, the taming of fire, the first drawings on cave walls, the first cities, the first books, the first journey into space, all of it began here, on this tree, in this dawn, with this smell of wet earth and the first ray of morning sun on damp grass. This is not fantasy. Every element of this morning, every sensation, every detail of biology, Every behavioral reflex is grounded in science, not in guesswork, not in fiction, in discoveries. In 1974, in Ethiopia, in the Afar region, Lucy was found, the skeleton of a female Australopithecus afarensis, 3.2 million years old. 40% of a skeleton, enough to reconstruct height, body mass, the features of the bones, the shape of the pelvis, enough to understand she walked upright. Her pelvis is already human-like in shape. Her legs are already adapted for upright walking, but her arms still carry traces of climbing. The finger bones are slightly curved, a sign of regular branch grasping. The shoulder joint is oriented somewhat differently than ours. She walked on the ground, and she climbed trees. Both worlds were hers. In 1976 at Lake Toli in Tanzania, Mary Leakey discovered footprints in hardened volcanic ash, 3,600,000 years old. The footprints of two creatures walking side by side, footprints already very similar to human ones. The big toe is not splayed outward as in a chimpanzee. It points forward. The heel bears weight. There is already an arch. Two creatures were going somewhere. Together. In one direction. Studies of isotopes in Australopithecine tooth enamel speak about diet. Much plant food, tubers, fruits, perhaps insects. Protein was present, but in smaller amounts than in later Homo. Reconstructions of the brain from endocasts of the inner surface of the skull show a slightly altered structure compared with chimpanzees. Broca's area, the region associated in us with speech, is already somewhat enlarged. Not speech yet, but already movement in that direction. Marks on animal bones from the same geological layers sometimes carry traces of stone tools, tools that we use to attribute only to habilis. But some finds suggest that perhaps Australopithecines also sometimes use stone, not making it systematically but taking a suitable stone and striking with it. Accidentally, situationally, sweat glands, upright walking, binocular color vision, sociality, memory for space and resources, all of this is reconstructed through bones, through DNA, through comparison with the closest living relatives, through traces preserved in rock. The morning described above is not invention. It is a reconstruction. And this is the strange part. This morning is 3 million years ago. A creature that could not speak. That did not know fire as a tool. That did not make tools systematically. That lived in a reality we can barely imagine. And still something from that morning is in us. Not metaphorically, literally. That alarm system that sorted sounds all night, it is in us. It is called the amygdala, and it still works while we sleep. It still releases adrenaline at a sudden sound in the dark. It still wakes us from noise, even when that noise is completely safe. That calibrated alarm between readiness and panic, it is in us. That is exactly why we do not panic at every shadow on the wall, but react to a real threat faster than we have time to think. That dopamine at the sight of ripe fruit, it is in us. That is exactly why food advertising works. That is why the sight of something red, sweet, saturated creates desire. That is why we eat more than we need when food is available, because a brain shaped by scarcity does not know abundance. It takes while it is offered. It ate while there was food. Because tomorrow, there might not be any. That social instinct, to be in a group, to know that one's own are nearby, to feel anxiety decrease in the presence of familiar others, it is in us. That is exactly why loneliness is physically painful. That is why social isolation affects health the way smoking does. That is why we cling so hard to belonging, to family, to a circle of friends, to a nation, to fans of the same music. Because rejection from the group 3 million years ago meant death. And the brain still treats it that way. That memory for where food and water were, it is in us. That is exactly why we remember where there was a good restaurant better than what was said in a lecture a week ago. The brain hierarchically prioritizes resource memory. That grooming as social glue transformed in us. We do not have fur, but we have conversation. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed and argued convincingly that human language grew out of grooming. That idle talk, small talk, gossip is social grooming. It is the same as picking through a neighbor's fur. It creates bonds, lowers anxiety, releases oxytocin. That is exactly why we talk so much about people, about who is with who did what, who behaved how. That is why gossip is a universal human practice. It is not a vice. It is evolution. But here is what we do not carry. We do not carry its calm before the unknown. The Australopithecine did not know what would happen tomorrow and did not think about it. Not because it was stupid, but because a brain without a sufficiently developed prefrontal cortex does not build elaborate models of the future, does not run scenarios, does not worry about what has not yet happened. That sounds like a deficiency, but it was adaptive, because energy spent worrying about a future one cannot control is spent energy. Better to spend it on what exists right now. Our brain, by contrast, can think about the future. It can build models, scenarios, forecasts. This is our main evolutionary achievement. But we pay for it with anxiety about what does not yet exist, with depression about what no longer exists, with worry as a background noise that never fully switches off. The Australopithecine did not know anxiety about the future. We do. That is the price of a larger brain. That is the same logic of compromise that runs through all evolution. Every advantage has a cost. Every new quality does not appear from nowhere. It pushes something older aside or reshapes it. A large brain means anxiety about tomorrow. Upright walking means back pain and difficult childbirth. Loss of hair means cold nights. Long childhood and slow maturation mean long dependence on the group. Nothing is free. The Australopithecine morning is over. The sun has risen. It is hot now. The group has found shade. Someone sleeps. Someone continues eating. Someone looks into the distance, toward the silhouettes of acacias on the horizon, where perhaps there is more food, or water, or shelter. This day is like thousands of others, like tens of thousands, like millions. Every day, roughly like this, dawn. Climbing down from the tree. Water, food, heat, shade, movement again. Food again, if luck allows. A tree again for the night. And in each of these days, there are small events that will enter no chronicle, because no chronicle exists yet. Someone found a stone of a suitable shape and used it. Someone understood that if a bone is struck this way, it will crack, and inside there will be marrow. Someone did something for the first time that, generations later, will become the first tradition. Without plans, without awareness, without understanding that it matters, simply because in that particular moment it worked. And that is exactly how everything that comes later begins. Not with a decision, not with an epiphany, not with a great invention on a great day, with a small morning, with cold dew on grass, with the smell of wet earth, with hunger that has to be quieted, with the group nearby that makes all of this bearable. 3 million years ago, East Africa, dawn.